Okay, 1 minute till we begin. Please take your seats. Excellent. Thanks for everybody for coming. Before we begin, I have a statement to read. The Planning Commission's role is to conduct public hearings and to make recommendations for the Board of Trustee about land use matters in the Town of Monument. Agendas and packet materials for this meeting are available on the town's website. The Planning Commission bylaws are also on the website, and should anyone wish to become a planning commissioner or an alternate, you may find an application on the town's website as well. Please note that these meetings are live streamed. However, comments are not monitored or responded to. You may contact the planning department with any questions you may have. Each commissioner agrees to a non-partial, objective, and fair review. Should a commissioner wish to disqualify him or herself for any conflict of personal or financial interest in this matter before us tonight, please say so now. For those who are attending tonight's public hearing, please refrain from disruptive commenting and demonstrations. They can cause the commission to be unable to hear the applicant's proposal properly and delay this hearing. If you wish to speak during this open public comment session, please add your name to the list at the back of the boardroom. Once we open up the public hearing for comment, you will be able to come to the podium and speak for up to 3 minutes, directly to the commission concerning each proposal. If multiple people have the same comment, we ask that only one person speak. Once the public hearing portion is closed, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to provide a rebuttal. The commission may ask additional questions at this time. I will then close the public comment session, and the commission will deliberate and discuss the proposal. This concludes the introduction. We will begin with the first item on tonight's agenda.
We're going to do roll call. Chairman Melanie Strupp.
Present?
Co-Chairman Daniel Orrs.
Here.
Commissioner Chris Wilhelmi.
Here.
Commissioner Steve King.
Here.
Commissioner Mitch LeKind.
Here.
Commissioner Joshua Thomas.
Here.
Next, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I believe next is the oath of office for some new members.
Yes, sir. Oath of office for the new members.
Right. Good evening. Tonight, I would like to invite up Mr. Bill Lewis and Mr. Sean White as Planning Commission oath of office. Both of you. Yeah, we'll do it individually. We'll start off with Mr. Lewis. If you'd please raise your right hand. I, Bill Lewis, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm
I, Bill Lewis, do solemnly and truly, we went way too long.
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
That I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and statutes of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution and statutes of the State of Colorado,
and ordinances of the Town of Monument,
and ordinance of the Town of Monument,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
and I will faithfully perform the duties
as a member of the Planning Commission for the Town of Monument,
as a member of the Planning Commission for the Town of Monument,
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Awesome. Congrats. All right. Okay. Mr. Mr. White, if you'll please raise your right hand. I, Sean White, do solemnly,
I, Sean White, do solemnly,
sincerely,
sincerely,
and truly declare
and truly declare
and affirm that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
and affirm that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and statutes of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution and statutes of the State of Colorado,
and ordinances of the Town of Monument,
and ordinances of the Town of Monument,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties as a member of the Planning Commission for the Town of Monument,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties as a member of the Planning Commission of the Town of Monument,
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations. Okay, I'm sorry? Board of Adjustments, yes. And now, Mr. Chad Bloom.
Come on, all by myself.
All right. And you will be taking the oath of office for the Board of Adjustments. If you'll raise your right hand. I, Chad Bloom, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare
I, Chad Bloom, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare
and affirm that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
and affirm that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and statutes of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution and statutes of the State of Colorado,
and ordinances of the Town of Monument,
and ordinances of the Town of Monument,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties as a member of the Board of Adjustments
and that I will faithfully perform the duties as a member of the Board of Adjustments
for the Town of Monument, upon which I am about to enter.
of the Town of Monument, upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. If you could.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you will all stand up here for a quick photo, and then I'll take those forms with your signatures as well.
We need an Italian meter.
Wide angle setup.
All right. Do you want me to get signatures? Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and welcome aboard. Larry, you're up.
Oh. Yes, at this time, I'd like to introduce the town manager, Mr. Mike Foreman. He'd like to introduce himself to the commission.
Awesome.
Yeah, how are y'all doing tonight?
Wow.
All right. Well, the reason why I'm here, I'm Mike Foreman. I'm the town manager for the Town of Monument. I've been here about 15 months now and watched a lot of the things that have been going on in the Town of Monument. A lot of growth going on, a lot of production from our staff. Our staff's been doing a great job. We've had some turnover in staff, but still we've been able to keep the ball rolling. I wanted to welcome some of our newest members and also applaud those of you that have been serving. You've been doing a great job, and we really appreciate everything that you do for the Town of Monument. So once again, from me and from the Town of Monument, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Any
you.
questions for me? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next agenda item is approval of minutes.
I'll make the motion that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Motion has passed. The next item is public hearings and recommendations for the village to rezone and sketch PD plan.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Tonight I'll be presenting the Village Rezone and Sketch Plan Development. It is situated either side of Jackson Creek Parkway, south of its intersection with State Highway 105, which abuts the northern boundary. It's an 84-acre parcel. It's 44 acres west of Jackson Creek Parkway and 40 acres to the east. Zone change. Rezone from planned commercial development to planned development. Property has been undeveloped commercial for 40 years. According to Summit Economics, the demand for commercial land is largely driven by residential population that is available to support new development. The catchment area for larger-scale commercial development in Monument is unlikely to extend further due to the completion from Colorado Springs to the south and Castle Rock to the north. It would generate plus or minus 630 new residential units which will provide much-needed support for new commercial development in Monument. The sketch plan. A sketch plan is a conceptual plan. It indicates the proposed uses and densities of the property, including open space, parks, trails, major plan roadways, and utility services. The village sketch PD plan, its proposed uses, is a mix of residential uses such as single-family detached, single-family attached, townhomes, and multifamily. It also will consist of a range of commercial, office, community, and service-related uses. The village sketch plan is as shown here. It will be a 4.7 acres commercial, office, or services, 12.7 acres of multifamily, 15 acres of single-family detached, 31.6 acres of single-family detached, attached, or townhomes, 5.5 acres of mixed use, and approximately 14 acres of parks and trails. The access points will be various locations along Jackson Creek Parkway, and I'll show that map up again. The black arrows will show where the access points will be. The access is also shown in the site from the east off of both Norwood Drive and White Marble Drive. These access points will eventually connect through Jackson Creek Parkway, but the route of these connections will be meandering rather than direct in order to limit the potential for cut-through traffic to the adjacent neighborhood to the east. As I said, with the black arrows is where the proposed access points will be. And Norwood Drive is right, I don't know if you can see my cursor, is right here. And White Marble is down here, cutting through from the development to the east. The traffic concerns. According to the traffic impact study, all left-turning movements from the side street on the Jackson Creek Parkway are projected at levels service E or F. The traffic study does not indicate a signal that is warranted at this time. The need for widening a traffic signal or roundabout on Jackson Creek Parkway will be evaluated at the time of the final PD site plan submittal. By this time, the applicant will have the exact numbers of residential units, commercial square footage to determine if or when a traffic signal or a roundabout is warranted. Parks, trails, and open space. There will be a linear 3.4 acre park on the west side of the site that has activity nodes along the corridor to provide additional recreational facilities, and 1.6 acre park on the east side of the centrally located to serve as an amenity for surrounding neighborhood. It will be just over 9 acres of trails, open space corridors, linked the parks to one another to create a non-motorized connectivity and circulation throughout the community. There will be a 50-foot buffer along the western boundary, and I'll show this again to the, of all the buffers, adjacent to I-25, decreasing to 25 feet adjacent to the I-24 ramp. This will help with visual and noise barrier for I-25, and will also enhance the highway corridor appearance of the development. There will be a 50 to 100-foot wide park and open space corridor along the south boundary on the west side of Jackson Creek Parkway to buffer against future commercial development to the south. And east of Jackson Creek Parkway, there will be a 70-foot buffer along the south boundary to provide transition to the half-acre county properties to the south and east. And this slide shows where all the buffers are and the proposed parks and open space. And impact on Lewis Palmer School District. Lewis Palmer School District has requested cash in lieu rather than land. The school district does not anticipate an issue with the potential increase of school-aged children from the village. In 2019, there was actually a decrease in enrollment, about 115 students. It is to the town of Monument's understanding that if a percentage of school-aged children exceeds the school district's expectations, the school boundaries will be redrawn to accommodate the children, and out of open enrollment options will be reevaluated. And this is a list of all the referrals that we sent this project to get their comments and input and back and forth to make this project what it is today. The staff recommends approval of the village rezone and sketch PD plan based on the findings that the proposal complies with all standards and criteria for approval.
Awesome. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks.
Larry, do we do questions now, or do we go to public comment? I just want to clarify.
If you have questions of staff, ask
Okay.
them now.
Yes. Commissioners, do you have questions of?
Can we put the site plan up, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. Tax implementation. Village Center at Woodmore, which is the community that I live in, was changed, their commercial was changed to residential. And there was I guess, the town had to come back and implement some refunds or something in regards to the streets, because there was not enough taxes collected since the change of the zoning. How does that work as far as commercial properties and versus residential, and what is a tax ratio versus commercial versus residential, I guess, in short?
Where'd you say you live?
Village Center at Woodmore,
Oh, okay.
just to the,
Well, on commercial, you get not just property tax as you do with residential, but you also get sales tax,
okay.
depending on the type of commercial that it is. It could be a doctor's office, probably less sales tax than a 7-Eleven. Does that answer your
And-
question?
Do we have a ratio, like, is it 4 times the amount in essence? Do we have an idea of a residential property versus a commercial property, and
In
what?
terms of property tax?
Yes,
I don't have that exact number, but certainly it's higher for commercial property,
Okay.
the property tax rate.
okay. Do you recall Village Center at Woodmore and what the, I guess, the town agreed to compensate that community for the roads and whatnot? Do you recall that situation?
In your particular area?
Yes, there was, and I apologize, I don't remember the specifics of that. I just remember that the town did come in and, I guess, supplement the lack of taxes that were collected.
I'm not sure that's the case.
Okay,
What happened is something that I believe is similar to this project, which is that the developer could not find commercial use for the property and the size and magnitude of which it was zoned, and so they rezoned it as residential. It's sold fairly quickly. I do not believe there was any compensation with regard to the change in potential revenue stream, not only to the town, but to the metro district that's formed there as well.
good. Thank you.
Since that time, the town has made an arrangement with the metro district to take over some of its maintenance responsibilities.
And with that area, do you know how much that costs the town to take over the streets for that district?
That's something I can get to you, but I don't have that on the tip of my tongue.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Is the name of this development going to be The Village?
Yes.
Do we not already have a development called The Village along Old Denver Highway?
It's called the Village at Monument.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a housing development, that one. This one will be mixed use.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. How did the staff take into consideration the map we're looking at, against the map 5, the future land use map in the comprehensive plan? In the comprehensive plan, it outlines this entire area should be mixed use. And, there's about 5.6 acres of mixed use, so I just wanted to get feedback on how that was weighed or balanced.
Well, as long as there's mixed use, it doesn't have to go by the acreage side. It's just, in the comp plan, it says mixed use. It doesn't say how many acres has to be, commercial or residential, as long as there's mixed use in there.
The entire area, though, was outlined as mixed use in the comprehensive plan.
What else can we help you with? I thought the answer was pretty complete.
Yeah.
Okay.
Steve, Josh,
I
Dan?
have some questions.
So initially when you were going through the staff report, you said 630 units more or less, but it's 715, is that correct?
That's the most that it will be,
But-
but they're assuming less than that.
Okay, but if we voted on this, it could be 715, correct?
Yes, but the applicant is assuming less than that amount.
Okay. Is there any requirements, because obviously Jackson Creek Parkway is overloaded now. Is there any requirement to contribute towards widening that road, or is that out of
Do you
our
wanna- yeah.
purview here?
We are currently working on that from the town's perspective, regardless of the progress of this particular development. However, certainly, if there are costs incurred that are directly relative to the development itself as it proceeds, because it's not going to be built overnight, then we will find ways to collect revenue to help with the improvements that have to be done that are caused by the development.
Do you know what the average lot size along Bowstring is, off the top of your head?
Bowstring on which side?
On the east side, those large lots that are off of Bowstring?
I would guess 10 to 12, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, they look bigger than that on the map, but if you don't know, that's all right. And then, what other areas in Monument are zoned for 25 units per acre?
The most density we have right now would be the apartments that were passed at 20 units per acre, 16 to 20 down by the Fairfield Inn.
Okay. And then lastly, what is the height, what is the height limit on the west side?
50 feet.
50 feet? Okay. All right, that's all I have.
I had a question on the barrier, or I
Yeah.
guess I'm just assuming it's a wall that would divide the development from like the exit ramp and/or 25? Is that,
It's going to be a trail system, open space area.
there's like 25 feet,
25
right?
feet buffer,
A
yes.
25-foot buffer, and then is there some sort of sound wall or something like that that's envisioned? Or nothing in between the off-ramp and the house? Or
Yeah.
home?
That might be discussed next with their applicant. I'm not sure with that
Okay.
right off the top of my head, but when our
That's spelled out in
applicant,
the packet we were given,
oh, the wall, the barrier wall,
sound wall.
the sound wall.
Is there a height associated with
I
that?
don't remember.
It's not
What's
the
it?
same sound wall it's on 105 for Village Center, right?
No, it'll be different than that one. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
I had one question regarding the widening of Jackson Creek Parkway. Is that anticipated to be complete before this project
Well,
starts?
This will be done in phases. This won't be done all at once.
But before
but-
this project's,
It,
before phase one?
The widening of Jackson Creek is considered, at least in my mind, a community need, not directly related to this development. So I believe the town is pursuing it simply because of the needs at this time for the traffic that uses it. Certainly, it will benefit additional traffic that is nearby by this development, but that's again where we will try to associate their impacts with whatever needs they have or whatever needs the road has above and beyond what is in place at the time.
Okay. Second, final question was regarding the access points. I didn't catch the entire list of municipalities that were listed.
yep. Do you want me to go to that?
Yeah, I assume that emergency services
Oops.
is comfortable with the sentence, the route of these connections will be meandering rather than direct. Is that something that,
Within the property itself, so people can't go directly into Millard or White Marble Drive.
okay,
So it won't be a direct route. It will prevent people going directly into it.
okay.
Yeah.
We do, one of the people we consult with is the Tri Lakes Monument Fire Department in that regard, and certainly when we get to final plan stage, those routes will be again reevaluated by that agency.
Is CenturyLink wasn't consulted, being that they're going to be adjoining on their property there?
They haven't asked to be on our referral list,
Oh,
so these are the people that we've asked or have asked to be on the referral list.
I've got a couple questions. Say this goes through tonight and ground breaks in a year. Can you give me the timeline, most optimistic timeline for Jackson Creek to be widened?
Most optimistic is really hard to predict. It's an expensive project. It's certainly a project that the town will need other grants or other revenue sources to be able to do. We're starting to put that picture together, but we don't have it. We want to, I believe the town's aim is to do it as soon as possible. We currently have funds available and are working on an RFP to get a firm to design, and that will probably take 1 year. So the soonest will be at construction would be in 2022, simply because of the design process. After that, it'll be a matter of making sure we can accumulate the amount of construction funds necessary.
So it's highly possible this could be completed before Jackson Creek Parkway's touched.
Well, this is going to take more than a year to complete this
Understand.
project, yeah.
But we don't have anywhere near a guesstimate of when Jackson Creek will even start.
If the development itself, prior to any other work being done on Jackson Creek, requires by its traffic report and our review thereof, the widening or additional lanes or whatever it might be, then that would be the developer's responsibility.
To widen Jackson Creek? I guess I'm not following what you're saying there. Because if they disturb Jackson Creek, obviously they got to put it back to where it was. I'm more worried about the future of Jackson Creek Parkway, is the continuation of Jackson Creek Parkway to be 4 lanes the way it should be.
Well, with regard to the development, the requirement they will, at a minimum, have is to accommodate the traffic they're generating in the phases that they move forward with. So if they move forward with a phase and the traffic report and our review of it suggests that they're going to need to put in 2 additional lanes, then they'll have to put in 2 additional lanes.
As long as the traffic report reflects that.
Right.
Okay. Our RFP, what we're looking at, would that have sidewalks like the rest of Jackson Creek?
It's intended to be the same cross-section as what Triview just built south of Higby.
Sounds good, because I just saw some woman walking through the field just now on my way here. And then my other question is, what's the county's timeline for 105?
We have talked about that. I think they wanted to do it last year, but they have some things they're still working out with regard to the Gold Canyon intersection. And so I'd say it's undetermined, and they are the best source to contact on that, and I
They
can't
had
tell
no
you.
issues with 105, that intersection of 105 and Jackson Creek?
That's the state.
But then 105 is their road, correct?
Yeah, beyond that.
Correct. But they had no issues? Because that pipe, that stems down to 2 lanes right there.
We didn't have any negative comments from the county.
Roger. Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other question?
No.
Applicant, if you'd like to speak. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners, and welcome new Commissioners. Quite the project to start off with. And my name is Andrea Barlow with NES. I'm representing the landowner and the applicant in this case. And I'm hoping that I can address some of the questions or expand on some of the answers to the questions that you were asked during my presentation. So I'm going to provide a little history. So you're familiar with what the request is for, a zone change and the sketch plan. I just want to emphasize that, as was indicated, the sketch plan is like the first stage in the subdivision process. It's a very conceptual plan. After that, we get down into more detailed preliminary planning and final PD site plans. So there's quite a way to go in just the planning process, let alone before we even get to the point where we can think about starting construction. So the location, overall context, I think you're familiar with it. Hopefully you've had a drive past the site and taken a look at it. Just a bit closer site context, we have Village Centre to the east and the Trinity Lutheran Church together with Monument Villas, which are some attached townhomes. Valley Vista Estates is actually the official subdivision name of the Village Centre commercial area. And then to the south along Bowstring is the Woodmore Green subdivision in the county. So just to give some context to the site, we did a visual analysis as part of our submittal. So we took some panoramic photographs of the site. And the site really is pretty flat, as you've probably seen. There's a little bit of grade going towards the south and west. There is a drainage channel that you can probably see from the photograph that runs through pretty much the center of that western part of the site. Looking at the panoramas, number one is from the site looking towards the mountains. Again, pretty uninterrupted, very little undulation or grade on the site. This is looking back from the I-25 on-ramp on the opposite side of I-25 looking back towards the site. And the significance of this is there's a really rather substantial berm along the off-ramp, which really shields the site from views from I-25. That's relevant to some of my comments later in the presentation. But it's really, the site is not particularly visible from I-25 at all. Even when you're coming from the south, you have a brief glimpse of it, and then it disappears behind the berm. Zoning, it's currently zoned PCD, which is the same as the zoning to the south. I'm going to look a little bit more broadly at the existing PCD zoning in the town later. It is, as Debbie indicated, it has been zoned for this for 40 years and not developed, and that's because it's not a great location for commercial on a large scale, which again I'll talk about in more detail. We're asking for it to be rezoned to PD, which is consistent with zoning to the east. PD zoning is very much a tailored zoning. It's very specific to the project that you're proposing. This is just a summary of the existing uses that are allowed in the PCD zone. So these are uses that we could put there today. There's a wide range of uses from automotive repair, service, gas sales, drugstores, liquor stores, and then to other more, what I say, civic uses. So I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but there's a wide range of uses that could go there now. Some of them generate sales tax, some of them don't. You could have schools, churches, all allowed in this zone. So I just want to go back for a little history. We first came forward with a project on this property in 2015 for entirely residential development. We had 2 neighborhood meetings at that time, and through that we generated a kind of understanding with the neighbors regarding access in particular. And I think the previous, no, I haven't got to that one yet. I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that point about the access through Norwood. But the previous plan was for just residential, a few more units. There's a little bit more density in there, and more units than we're proposing now, and 8.4 acres of parks. So the current plan we're proposing, the reason we're back is because that actually got denied. And they got denied primarily because we weren't providing any commercial. The town wanted to see some commercial development on this site, even though we really don't think it's a viable option for the entire property, and I'll talk about that in more detail. But we went back to the town staff and talked thoroughly with them over several months to years about what's the best approach for this property. And we talked to the Chamber of Commerce to get their take on whether this type of mixed-use commercial would be appropriate in the context of the residential. And through those discussions, this is the plan we came up with. And one of the suggestions of the town was to include an area of mixed use as well as commercial, and also The linear park arrangement on the western parcel was actually a suggestion from town staff. We had more centralised park like we have on the east side currently shown. So this plan has evolved over many meetings and discussions to the plan we are presenting today. I think we talked about the range of land uses. I will touch on range of density and the range. We have the ranges of density because we really don't know what type of product we anticipate here. We've actually prepared some more detailed layouts just to get an idea of what the capacity of the site is likely to be. So our estimate of our units and the approximately plus or minus 630 comes from actually looking at the site in more detail. It's very rare when you have a density range that you will ever hit that maximum density because of the need for internals, especially when it's on this broader conceptual level, because of the need for internal streets, landscaping and so on. That all has to be taken into account. So this really is our best estimate of what we think the number of units will be, which is around the 630. And we've increased the amount of parks and trails to around 14 acres. So we had a neighbourhood meeting on February the 18th, and here's some of the questions that are raised. I do want to go back though and say in 2015 we had 2 neighbourhood meetings before we submitted, after we had submitted. At that time the primary concern was the access, which we had shown as a straight shot from Norwood. But some of the other issues that were addressed or raised at the meeting would be what's the mix of the residential and the commercial? Will the height of buildings block the views? How dense will the multifamily be? What type of uses will be in the commercial? And parks, is it better to have the parks connections, meandering trails, or one big park? Timing for Jackson Creek Parkway. And I would say I think the issue that took up most of the time at the neighbourhood meeting was a discussion on schools, school capacity, school land, school fees, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about these individually. So the proposed parks and trails, we actually meet the requirement that the town has in the context of the range of, if we went with the low range and the high range, we would have a requirement for 5.8 acres at the low range and 10 at the high range of our density. As I've indicated, we're probably going to be somewhere in the middle. We've provided 5 formal parks, I would say, for this development, together with 9.3 acres of open space and trails. Town staff, as I previously indicated, they did express a preference on the west side for the linear trail arrangement. They felt that was more conducive to integrating with the commercial development rather than a centralised park, and improved trail connectivity. So when we went to the neighbourhood meeting, we presented, it's probably really difficult to see, and I don't have a cursor, so we presented the plan on the left. We had one resident who I had a lengthy discussion with afterwards wanted to see more trails through the site and trail connection to the south, which we incorporated on the plan when we resubmitted to the town before coming to the hearing. So the trail as along the I-25 side, as you can see on the plan on the left, it kind of cuts into the development about halfway up on that green area, whereas we extended it to go all the way around the periphery of the development. And what you can't see, because the screen is cutting it off, we also indicated an arrow to the south so that the developers, a combination of developers of the property to the south, when that comes forward, knows there's an intent to keep that trail system going. And also, if by that time there are residents who live in that corner, they are expecting a trail system that's going to go past where they live and extend to the south. We talked about Jackson Creek Parkway. We understand that the town has applied or is in the process of applying for funding to design and construct for 80% of the costs. Obviously, that means there's 20% of the costs that have to come from somewhere else. And this development is fully expecting to have to contribute towards that in the context of what's reasonable and proportional to the trips that are generated by this development. So that will be something that we will anticipate doing. And in terms of the timing, Mr. Manning was absolutely correct that if we come ahead of that, then we will be required to do whatever road improvements, traffic improvements, whether it's additional turn lanes at the intersection of Jackson Creek and 105, or if there is a need to provide turning lanes on Jackson Creek at the site entrances, and so on. And also the need for traffic signals or roundabouts has been discussed, whichever ultimately is the preference, that will be assessed as each phase of development comes in. And there is the word warrant isn't just a word from the dictionary, it is a specific traffic engineering term. You've got to meet specific warrants to be allowed to have a traffic signal or a roundabout. Otherwise, they just don't function properly. This trip generation will be significantly less than if this were developed entirely for commercial. So the mix of residential traffic generation is much less. It's probably between 6 to 10 times less than commercial, depending on the type of commercial. So that the improvements to Jackson Creek Parkway are still proposed to be the same, but the traffic versus what could be developed with the current zoning is much less. And this is showing the cross-section, the future cross-section of Jackson Creek. So it will be a central median, 2 travel lanes, a bike lane at the side, and the sidewalks. Connections to adjacent neighbourhoods. So this is where I want to discuss where we started and where we've ended up. So the plan on the far left was the initial plan we presented to the neighbourhood in 2015. We showed a direct extension of Norwood between Jackson Creek Parkway to Norwood Drive and as an extension. That was very much supported by town staff, by the fire department. Everybody except the neighbourhood to the east thought it was a good idea to have that improved connectivity. The neighbourhood to the east were vehemently opposed to that, concerned about through traffic. So when we submitted made our first submittal to the town in 2015, we showed the connection coming through from Norwood, but we indicated in our narrative then, as we are now, that we are not going to have a direct connection, that it will meander through the neighbourhood. Generally speaking, as long as those streets are meeting town requirements, that they don't have any dead ends and create kind of enclaves that the fire department get into, then the fire department are generally okay with meandering streets if they have the ability for the trucks to turn and get into the neighbourhood. So obviously we have to design that and have that in mind when we come in with our final plans. And then to today's current plan, so I just want to clarify that both Norwood and White Marble terminate right at the site boundary. There was always an intent that they would connect through into this property. And so we are showing those in this project again through discussions with town staff, the fire department. More connectivity is better. It's just good planning. It's good planning for this community, the village, and it's good planning for the adjacent neighbourhood in terms of safety and access for emergency vehicles. We have shown a park right in the middle of our 2 access points. That's our plan. So the streets will go around the park and they will not have that direct connection. So there was some talk about the development intent. Hopefully this is all visible. So I've indicated on the plan our different densities in a bit bigger text so you can see them. And I've also identified on the east side the comparative densities of the properties to the south and the east. Somebody asked a question of how large the lots along Bowstring are. They are half-acre lots in the county, and that's at about a 1.4 dwelling unit per acre. Actually, some of them are slightly bigger, but the minimum is half-acre lots. That's the zoning there. And we have proposed a 70-foot buffer along that boundary, together with a 1 to 3 dwelling unit per acre density, to help with that transition from the lower density in the county to the site. And then we gradually get higher density as we increase north on that eastern side. And as you can see, where our yellow areas, 1 to 3 dwelling units per acre. The adjacent development is 2.7 dwelling units per acre. The actual lots that are immediately adjacent are smaller than, I took the kind of the broader little neighborhood there. The lots get bigger as you go further east, but the immediately adjacent lots are about 8,000 square feet. And then moving north, you can see that the density gets increasingly higher on the east side at 7.6 dwelling units per acre up to 8.7 in the villas and monument villas. And we've matched that with a density range of between 5 and 8 dwelling units per acre. So we've tried to be really conscious of the adjacent neighbours and matching the density and the type of residential. When we get onto the west side of Jackson Creek Parkway, we've increased the density. There really is no residential to the north. It's primarily commercial or open land, CDOT-owned land. And so that's consistent with our original plan, is our intent to have our higher density area in that location. And then in that southern area, we have a bit more of a broader range, which spans from the 5 all the way up to the 12 to just allow us flexibility in terms of the type of product that could go there. But we're anticipating in those areas townhomes, single family attached. We don't really use the term duplexes because duplex implies they're on one lot. Single family attached is each on the individual lots with the lot line going down the middle. And that's a very popular product type right now, as are townhomes. Regarding the type of commercial, we would be looking at much more local retail service uses. I've given some indications of the type of uses that we would anticipate that really are serving not just this community, because to be honest, this community by itself, even though it's 600 plus units, is not going to support very much commercial. You need a lot of residential to support a small area of commercial, and that's something I'm going to discuss a little bit more. So really just smaller retail, office, business offices, fitness and other lifestyle facilities, probably similar to what you have over at the village centre, that kind of scale, and maybe a little bit more office use. There was a question about building height. The current zoning allows for a 50-foot building height, and we would want to continue that. Just to give you a range of commercial, multifamily, I wouldn't anticipate the commercial being taller buildings. Usually they're single-story or two-story if it's offices. The multifamily typically is 3 to 4 stories. That would get up to about 45 feet in height, 50 feet if you include things like parapets and what have you, but that's not included in the height calculation. And then single-family residential, most single-family is below 30 feet. Single-family attached and townhomes tend to be a bit narrower and taller, so they can often go up to 35 feet. So that's the sort of ranges we think we will be in. Some of the uses that were identified with the existing zoning would you'll be probably hitting that 50 feet or 40 to 50 feet across much more of the site with commercial zoning across the whole property. So the advantage with the residential to break it up, it's going to impact views a lot less than would a commercial development, which is going to have a little bit more massing of buildings. Yes, they would have open parking areas, but there would be bigger buildings and a lot more activity as well. So schools, that was discussed. I think Debbie mentioned some specific school considerations, but we look at 2 things when we're proposing a development. The code is quite specific. The school can either ask for land dedication or fees in lieu of land dedication. We don't dictate that as a developer, the school district does. And the school works with the town to set its land dedication requirements and its school fees. There were some questions about whether they were enough. That is something the school district and town decide between them. The developer, again, does not determine what the fees are or what the land dedication requirements are. So based upon our density ranges, our types of residential, The land dedication, well, first of all, the students that would be generated from the site is between 85 and 155 students, based on the calculations, the formulas that the school district uses. Approximately half of those are elementary, and the remainder is split between middle and high school. Middle is a little higher than high school. And that results in a land dedication requirement for between 2.1 and 3.9 acres. The minimum size for an elementary school is 10 acres. So clearly on that basis, the school district has no use for 2 to 4 acres of land on this site because it can't build a school on it. And I'll come on to in my context of my final bullet, they have land for school. That's not their issue. Cash in lieu. So the school district has asked for cash in lieu of land dedication. That will range depending on what we actually submit, based on the current code and the current fees, between $176,000 and $318,000. We pay those fees when we pull a building permit. So there's a long way to go between now and when we will actually have to pay those fees. Could those fees change? They could. That's a discussion between the town and the school district about what's the appropriate level of those fees. But as of now, that's the fee range that this would generate. In 2017, and I don't know whether any of you were involved in this, but the district undertook quite a wide-ranging facilities planning exercise. There were multiple open houses. I went to a couple. And as a result of that, they identified land at Bear Creek and Forest Lakes for new elementary schools. And with that new elementary school at Bear Creek, they would convert the existing elementary, which was actually designed as a middle school, back to a middle school. So from their assessment, that meets their requirements. The problem the school district has, it doesn't have the funding to build them. So developers are not in the business of building schools. They're in the business of, that they are required to pay land or dedication per, and that's a state requirement which trickles down into the local ordinances. So based on this, the school district have asked us to pay fees. That will be paid when the building permits are pulled. There are no school fees for commercial development. Obviously, they don't generate any school children, but the school will actually benefit from fees from this development. So I want to talk about why this site hasn't been built on for 40 years for commercial development. It really just doesn't, it's not suited. There's a limited trade area. You've got Colorado Springs to the south, Castle Rock to the north, and then between Monument and Castle Rock, you've got vast areas of open space. You've got the Air Force Academy. Its trade area is pretty limited. And in addition to that, this site, as they indicate, or try to indicate from the photograph, and I would encourage you to maybe go and look at the site, try to get a view of the site as you're driving on the highway. You'll get a brief glimpse and that's it. So it doesn't really have the visibility to attract retail development. Could it attract other employment development potentially? But again, that visibility is often an issue for employees as well. There's already well-established regional retail at Monument Marketplace, and quite a bit of national retail activity happening more in that Baptist Road area. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So it makes it even more challenging to attract a large commercial development to this property. Bearing in mind, it is 84 acres, that's a big area. And the site's location, based on economic analyst, says it's better suited for what they call an aggregation center, which is kind of like what I described, a mix of local services, but also places where local residents go. Increasingly, it's to go and pick up their Amazon packages and so on and so forth. So it's more of and grab a coffee at the same time. So it's just more of a local centre where a lot of different activities take place. So with this, I wanted to look at the zoning map. This is your current zoning map It is a little out of date. It hasn't been updated since 2012. Is that right, Larry? 11, somewhere around there. So there have been some changes, and this is going to be challenging without a pointer. Unless, does this have a pointer? Not going to help you because you can't all see my screen, so that I'm looking at. So the areas that are in the pink and purple are areas that are zoned for commercial. So pink is PCD, and the purple is PID, which is industrial. It gets a bit difficult to see at this level because the central part all has a hatching across it, which means it's Regency Park. So the pink kind of starts to look like purple. But you can see our site next to the interchange of 105 and the highway. And further south, you can see Monument Marketplace, which is another similar sized area. So that just gives you some context to the scale. Monument Marketplace has been going for many years and it's still not fully built out. That is the focus of the regional development in Monument, and should stay the focus, in my opinion, in that if you try to disperse it, you're just going to generate a lot of empty commercial areas. Obviously, you've got the natural grocers in that area shown as PID adjacent to Baptist. Next to that, or just to the east of that, is the King Soopers commercial centre. And then there's a lot of commercial up in that northeast corner, west corner, sorry, beg your pardon, which is around the town centre and kind of along I-25. The large PCD area, this is where I say it's a bit out of date, that is south of Monument Lake, is actually been rezoned to the Lake of Rockies for residential, so that's no longer there. But I want to talk a little bit about the large areas of PID on the west side of the highway. So part of that area has already been rezoned as Connexus. That is now going to be more of a business centre with more of a mix of business, industrial and commercial uses. We are working on behalf of the landowner, which is the same landowner. So the same landowner that owns this site originally owned that entire area from Baptist Road, that's shown as PID, almost up to 2nd Street. Part of that was sold for the Connexus development, and the Connexus development is intended to expand north of that to take up the rest of that development, with continuing that more of a mix of uses, introducing more commercial in that area. The part to the south, you can see the PCD area, that is immediately next to the, I think it's still Diamond Shamrock, or it may be with Valera now, truck stop. That is that, and the area to the north is currently before the town for review. That is including commercial on that southern part, plus changing the industrial to, again, a mix of industrial and commercial, so there's going to be even more commercial potential in that area. The darker purple area on the south side of Baptist Road, that's 213 acres. That will be probably submitted to the town in the next few weeks. That zoning was approved with the annexation of that property in the 80s. The zoning ordinance encompasses all the Regency Park industrial uses and all the Regency Park commercial uses within that zone as allowed. So even though it says PID, the actual zoning ordinance allows a wide range of commercial uses in that location, the same as I basically showed you earlier. So if you look at all the purple areas and the pink areas, and then you look at the yellow and the beige areas, which are basically residential areas, I mean, to me it stands out that there is far too much commercial land allocated zoned in Monument to that this population can support. Even when you take in the surrounding county areas of Woodmore and Fox Run area and so on, we did the assessment in our project statement, and it's just that the population, even assuming population growth over the next 20 years, can only support one regional commercial centre and maybe a handful of the neighbourhood centres, plus the downtown. I mean, the focus should be on regenerating or improving, enhancing, however you want to look at it, Monument Town Centre. It's a great little town centre, but with more residential coming into the area, it could be a better town centre, more customers, and customers in this location, on this site, who really could walk into the downtown just across I-25, but they could walk. There is a sidewalk. The point is that it's one thing to want the commercial land and the sales tax that comes from that, but it's another thing to unrealistically hold out in the hope that commercial land will come along when there's not the residential populations to support it. It needs to be a balance. There needs to be more rooftops to support the commercial. And that's really the fundamental basis of our argument for why we don't think this is suitable for commercial and should be residential, because you've got to start shifting that balance if you want to make not only the existing commercial areas successful, but encourage some of these other areas for commercial that are coming forward. And just, again, going back to the existing zoning permitted uses, I showed this slide earlier. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but I just wanted to highlight, these are all the uses that are allowed in the current zoning. And the ones that I've highlighted are the ones that generate sales tax. And that's been generous. I've hatched the ones that would potentially, there's obviously retail would definitely, we all know that a convenience store, drugstore, liquor store, restaurants, retail stores will generate sales tax. But things like repair businesses, automotive repairs, personal service establishment, if you think, I always use the example of a hair salon, right? So you go in, the products that they purchase to perform the service are not taxable. If they want to sell me some product while I'm there, that's taxable. So really only a small portion of a lot of these are actually taxable businesses. I just think that puts it in context of, oh, we've got to keep this commercial land, but there's no guarantee that any of these commercially zoned properties will come up with all this retail land. We think the site's better suited for the mixed density and mixed use development we were proposing. The development with the different types of residential is going to provide more housing choice, more housing price points for more. This is coming from our economic analysis, and really to help attract the type of workforce that are needed to attract the employees, the primary employees that the town really wants to get. A lot of the problems that these employees state, and we've heard this from the chamber, and it's the same. We hear the same in Colorado Springs. There's not enough affordable housing for the people who we need to work in our businesses. It provides the opportunity for the longer term residents who may want to move down into something a little smaller. There's really not much opportunity for that in the monument, and that frees up their houses to bring in families. Additional residential, as I noted before, it's going to support you downtown. Even if they don't walk, they're far to drive, but I would encourage them to walk. There's an increasing trend which is becoming more of a recognized contributor to sales tax. That you get taxed at your home whenever you buy something off the internet. Your home is the point of sales of that sales tax revenue. And we think that really, if you don't support this type of development, not necessarily just on this site, just generally in the town, then you're just going to stagnate and people are going to go to Colorado Springs because there's going to be no choice, no opportunities for moving around within the housing stock. And so we think it's really important that this choice of housing is available. So we looked at the code. The objective of the code is to promote the health, safety, convenience, order, prosperity, aesthetics, environmental quality, and general welfare of the residents, both present and future. So we think we'll achieve this by creating that residential diversity and more housing choice, creating a more viable neighborhood scale community, commercial community development. We think it's going to be a more compatible transition from the neighborhood to the east. Between neighborhood to the east and I-25, it's going to provide a gradual transition in intensity and density of development versus going bam straight into commercial along Jackson Creek. So the proposed development will also, I think, based on our assessment of the massing of the comparative densities of the allowed commercial to what we're proposing here will be less intense and therefore protect the views. It will have a more open appearance. It'll have a residential feel, so it just generally be more aesthetically compatible with the neighbourhood to the east. And I think, as I noted before, the traffic generation will be significantly less than if it were developed entirely as commercial. And somebody asked a question about the comprehensive plan. So it is shown as MU for the entire property, with green areas for trails and recreation going through the site. The mixed use is defined as a mixture of non-residential and residential development that provides convenience, goods, services and employment opportunities for area residents. We feel we've provided that mix. We have one specific area that is just mixed use, but we've got commercial in this development. We've got a mix of residential. So we're not just providing one type of residential for the entire area. We include the trails and park connectivity that is shown on the comprehensive plan. And as I mentioned, the residential component is a mix of uses, and the comprehensive plan specifically acknowledged that residential attached is an important component of the overall land use mix for the town. It's providing a mix of housing options for the workforce. I think the empty nesters, move down folks that we talked about, and just to provide that additional choice for people transitioning out of the single family residential. So the comprehensive plan does acknowledge that this type of development is important, and so we feel that we've created a mix of uses and we meet that requirement of the comprehensive plan. Here are some other policies of the comprehensive plan which we feel we are consistent with, allowing for a wider array of land use types to meet changing community needs, and it's exactly what we're doing. Promoting infill on vacant land is a large infill, but it's effectively infill. It's surrounded by existing development. Also encouraging moving away from single-use developments. So in contrast to the 84 acres being one commercial development, we're moving away from that single use to a more mix of complementary land uses, exactly what the comprehensive plan is suggesting, to create a more balanced live, work, play environment. And then also moving to planned development rather than traditional straight zonings provides opportunities to include more parks, open space and trails, which is what we're trying to achieve here. And summary, so I'm at the end. So we think we're consistent with the municipal code, the comprehensive plan. It's this basic premise of our decision to rezone this, a decision that we worked on for a long time to get to this plan, that because the site is really not viable for a commercial development across the entire property, and that this mixed residential and non-residential development with neighbourhood commercial and services is really the best use and most viable use for the property. And we feel we addressed the majority of the neighbourhood concerns as we went through the process. There were some other kind of more, I would say, peripheral concerns from one or two people. They may come up tonight. I'm happy to address them if they do. But the fundamental concern was the cut through of traffic and also that density transition as well. So, and I did want to talk about, sorry, I just remembered, just flashed into my mind about the sound walls. I don't, we are not at the point yet where we're analysing that level of detail. We are providing the buffers, which are the requirements of the code, a 50-foot buffer along I-25 itself, which we extended a little further north, and then 25 feet on the the off-ramp. We will evaluate that as each development comes forward. There are specific requirements based on noise levels and CDOT requirements as well, because it's off I-25. So we will have to provide those noise studies when we get to that level. A noise wall might be an answer in some cases. There may be other mitigations, berms. There is already a substantial berm there. I think, as I noted, this site is pretty much about 20 feet higher than I-25, and the buildings will be set back. So all that's going to be taken into account. But at this point, it is a sketch plan, conceptual plan, and I don't think there's any specific commitment to sound walls or not at this point. It's subject to further evaluation. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. Commissioners?
I have some questions.
Sure.
So if you got this approved, what would be the plan forward? I mean, kind of like a timeline.
We were asked that at the neighbourhood meeting. We always are. It's difficult to tell because it's a big site. We anticipate this being built out in phases. I would, with the current market the way it is right now, let me backtrack. As indicated earlier on in my presentation, that there is a planning process to go through yet before we have a point at time where we can actually pull a building permit and build a home. And that is probably a couple of years in itself, based on the different phases, to really get any homes on the ground. I would say you're talking probably a couple of years from now if we get approvals, smooth going all the way through. To full build out, I would say it could be anything. If you were really optimistic, you might, with the current market, if that keeps going as it is, which is pretty aggressive, you could be talking 5 or 6 years. If there's a crash, again, or it slows down, you could be talking 10 to 12 years. I'll give you an example. We did the first sketch plan for Sanctuary Point in 2006, and we prepared the first phase preliminary plan, and then the market crashed, and it sat there until about 2014. So it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen with the market. It's going to be market driven, but you could be talking anywhere from 5 to 6 years to 10 to 12 years. So I appreciate the question, but it's a really difficult one to answer.
Right. But it's not like, I guess what I'm getting at is it's not like if this gets approved, you're going to push forward and try to start building right away.
No, I mean, I'm representing the landowner here, so he is just trying to get a zoning that he can then market to developers. It's something that's actually viable to market. So that process will take some time, and then it's not just going to be we get approved. First, the sketch plan is the very preliminary stage in the process, and we can't do really well. We could probably start thinking about marketing the site if we get this sketch plan and zoning approved, because we've got a little bit more certainty about what we can do there. But it will depend on whether it's sold to one developer to do the entire property. It could be sold to different developers, because obviously commercial developers don't usually do residential and vice versa, and multifamily, some single-family developers do multifamily, but others don't. So it could be, it's likely to be in different phases based on the type of development.
So if the landowner wants to rezone this and we're in the middle of a development code change, why not just wait until that's finished and put that into the mix as far as IB?
Well, I'm not anticipating that, and Mr. Manning can clarify, and I've been involved in the discussions on the rezoning or the zoning rewrite efforts. I'm not sure that there's any intent of actually rezoning properties. There may be looking at reclassifying some of the zones, and looking at different types of zoning's appropriateness in terms of, I know there's particular discussion on heavy industrial zoning and so on, but I'm not sure that there's an intent to rezone specific properties, but I've deferred to planning staff on that.
I would agree.
But the owner of the property could request that would be rezoned, correct? In that plan?
Well, not
Right.
Not through
No, I get that.
Not through that process. It would still require a zoning ordinance, a rezoning ordinance. The rewrite of the zoning code is a different process. It's not going to the map I showed you, the zoning map. It's not going to redraw that zoning map.
No, and I understand that. I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more clarification from the consultants that are working on this as to what would be the mix of densities and whatnot, because I agree with you that this is not a good commercial site, and I'd love to see this built as residential. The problem that I have with this is the density, and every application that comes across here gets more dense and more dense, and we have to balance somehow with our comprehensive plan on small town feel and you know, making a good choice for the residents here without using words like, you know, diversity of housing, because a 50-story high-rise would be diversity of housing, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for the community. So I would like personally to see what they come back with as far as, you know, density types. I have problems with the density. I mean, that's where my problems lie with this. You answered a lot of the other questions that I had already, so I'll leave it at that. And then I know that you don't have anything to do with this, but did you say that the school districts only thought there would be like 85 to 100 kids out of this?
That's based on the range of densities we have, and that's their student generation calculation, which is in the zone, the subdivision code.
I look at this and I see 715 units, and
it's based on the type of unit. So the more, actually, the way their calculation works is the more dense it gets, the less children.
no, and I agree with you there. I
anticipate.
agree with you there too. I'm just, it seems like it's a low number, and I get it. You don't make those calculations.
No.
I'm just bringing it up. That's really all the questions I had. You answered all the other ones that I had.
I've got a couple follow-up on the school one. When was the school's review done?
It was done during our submittal process. We submitted at just before Christmas last year, and so it would probably be sometime in January. You probably have the exact date.
The school review?
Yeah, the date.
Oh, it's the date for the review?
When did the school board review the plans?
Oh, yes, in January.
In January
Yes,
of 2020?
Yes.
Okay, Roger.
They've reviewed it at the same time all the other referrals got it. They all got it at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your 2015 plans only had one access route out of the east, the neighborhoods to the east. Now this one appears to have two.
It does. That was a decision that was made based on discussions with town staff who wanted really to see as much connectivity as possible. Both those streets, as I indicated, terminate right at the property boundary. They had always intended that they would continue into this property. So we were just respecting that original intent and the request by the town staff to have connectivity.
But you did brief that there was some issues with the citizens to the east of it.
There were on the, we didn't hear too much about that at the most recent neighbourhood meeting. I'm not saying that it's not a concern, but that we didn't hear a lot about that specific issue. We heard a lot about it at the very first meeting we had in 2015, because we were showing that road going down, basically a continuation of Knollwood Drive directly to the Jackson Creek Parkway. So that's when we changed it to being a more indirect connection. But we had always intended to have that, even with the previous plan, that indirect internal connection.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, some follow-up on, I kind of disagree in regards to the suitability for commercial space. I mean, it seems like every other intersection of 25 and a major road is, you know, a desirable area. Obviously, time has told a different story, but it seems like this is jumping the gun, so to speak. Maybe that area is just not ready yet for the commercial, as commercial continues to push north, like Monument Marketplace North and everything that could come after the YMCA. But in terms of the commercial use, well, let me take a step back. 105, has any analysis been done on 105 or its impact, this plan on 105?
In terms of, the traffic impact study that was prepared looked at the intersection of Jackson Creek Parkway, and it has to look at the surrounding area and the intersections. So that has been considered in the traffic study.
What
But in
was-
terms of the, obviously the county improvements to 105, I don't know if you're referring to that, but they are doing their own widening and improvements.
So that's on the county?
That's in the
That has
county.
nothing to do with the?
No, it's nothing to do with this.
Would there be any contribution from this development to
no,
105?
no.
Okay. And then you mentioned like a 20% to Jackson Creek, but that's not even, that's a maybe, it sounds like,
Well,
a
no,
contribution.
there would definitely have to, I would pretty much say there's definitely going to be some form of contribution from this, through this development to Jackson Creek Parkway improvements. But it's going to be proportional to the traffic that this development adds to traffic at Jackson Creek. It's not going to fall entirely on this development,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
So, but right now, there's no number or even estimate as to what the impact of, like, say, 715 new units, mixed use is?
The traffic report looks at this in general terms. It's acknowledged that Jackson Creek will at some point need to be widened, and that there will likely be needing, again, at different points in the development, introduction of traffic signals on Jackson Creek, additional lanes, turn lanes at Jackson Creek or 105. That's all in the traffic report, so that's analysed at this 30,000 foot level, and then every phase of development that comes forward will have to do a much more detailed traffic analysis, because at that point we will know exactly how many houses we have, exactly how much commercial, and then that will be factored in, and then any improvements that are required to support that development, if it comes in advance of the overall widening of Jackson Creek, will have to be implemented at that point. But that will be in the context of the overall objective of widening Jackson Creek. So we're not going to do something, and the town won't require us to do anything that will just have to be ripped out and redone. That won't make sense. So it will have to be done in the context of the overall planned cross-section for Jackson Creek.
Okay. And the amount, the $175,000 to $317,000 for D38, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
That's the most that's going to come out of this?
Yeah, it's based purely on that calculation and based on the number of units. I wouldn't say, yes, I would say that the range I've given you is definitely the top end. I would expect it to be somewhere in between. It would depend on the type of residential. Single family attached is a higher rate than townhomes. For the purpose of my estimate, I just assumed that those mid density ranges would be split evenly between the two without knowing what actually will come forward. So those sort of things will impact that type of analysis.
Okay. So, and then the 50-foot building height is still viable in terms of that northwest area? There could be 50-foot high buildings there?
Most apartment buildings don't exceed 4 stories in height, which is around that 45 to 50 height. There's a slope there, so we're probably going to bring that down as well. The northern part of that site is about 20 feet above 105, so there's probably going to be some grading to bring that site down. And then the height of the buildings is taken from the finished grade, whatever the finished grade is. So it's not necessarily going to be 50 foot above the current grade. It will be a 50-foot building, and that's taken across the average. So sometimes the buildings can step down the slope, 3 stories one side, 4 stories the other side, until we get into that level of detail. But yes, it's once you start getting above 4 stories, you get into different construction techniques, costs, and so on. So it's very rare for anything in Colorado Springs area to be more than 4-story.
So you provided pictures previously of just, grassland, beautiful views. Do you have any pictures of projected what the view would be from either the same spot or other locations along Jackson Creek with these types of apartment buildings or other multi-unit dwellings?
Not from Jackson Creek, no. I mean, we haven't looked at the viewshed analysis in that detail because we don't really know what's going to go there. We can look at that when we've got a more detailed layout. From that section of Jackson Creek, there will be, if there are apartment buildings, yes, there will be impact on views. We focus more on the impact on views from the residential to the east in terms of trying to limit the type of development there to just more of a standard single-family or townhome as exists to the east.
You'd agree, though, that 15 to 25 dwelling units per acre would require at least 2 stories worth of buildings, 3 stories, 4 stories?
In that area, 15 to 25, we would anticipate, you could get 15 dwelling units per acre with just a 2-story building, high-density development.
Very high
But if
density.
you're going up into apartment-style development, then yes, you're going to be in that 20, possibly 25 dwelling units per acre range.
Okay. And I honestly have not seen something so close to an off-ramp since I was in California, to be honest with you.
Uh-huh.
And the idea of sound walls, any consideration for that? You mentioned it, but there really hasn't been no consideration for the amount.
This is a sketch plan. We're not required to, and nor can we really get into that level of detail at the sketch plan level. It will come with the site development plans. We will have to address noise. We will have to consider whether a noise wall is needed or a berm. Like I say, there's multiple ways to address noise. It can just be distance. We don't have to build right up to that edge. We can add an additional 50 feet of buffer to get that distance away from for the building, away from we could put parking in that intervening area. So until we get into the site design, knowing what type of noise mitigation is needed, it's not, the sketch plan isn't the place to get into that level of detail. But we understand the comment and concern, but it is a requirement for us to address that at the development plan level.
The trail, it seems like there's a trail that lines the border, is that right?
That is correct, yes. Through the buffer area, that was at the request. We had that previously. Our original plan had it on that wider buffer, and then at requests of certain neighbours that we extended that trail to go all the way around the development.
And then what was the feedback on literally having a trail that lines an off-ramp and then
We were
25?
asked to put that in. We didn't have that originally.
At that location?
Yes.
Do trails, and I don't know if this is better for staff, do trails count towards the acreage of open space that's needed or otherwise?
I would ask first, did your
Okay.
calculation include the trails?
So my calculation of the parks was based on the parks themselves, but there is the additional open space trail corridors as well.
So the trails did kind of factor into...
They contribute to some of it, but when you put them both together, it well exceeds the parkland dedication requirement.
Okay. No other comments, thanks.
I've got a question. Is the applicant here?
The landowner is here, yes.
Okay, based on the comments that Steve made about the speed of this, I mean, it's been waiting 40 years to rezone, tried once. Does the landowner have people knocking on the door, waiting to buy the land so they can develop it?
Not for commercial, he doesn't know.
Well, for residential.
For residential, he's got some interest, yes. I mean, there is interest in developing residential in Monument. Yeah, there is a lot, but not for commercial. The commercial needs rooftops to make the commercial
No,
viable.
understand.
Yeah.
I just was wondering
Yeah.
if there are people waiting in the wings to begin.
I would say no specific people at this point in time, but there's definitely residential interest.
Thanks.
Okay. I just have one, I guess, area of focus is going from commercial to residential. I would, from my perspective, definitely agree with that shift because managing 7 businesses across the Front Range, my organization has the most difficulty by far recruiting hourly staff in the Monument area. We pay a 20-25% premium for hourly wage workers. So to continue to develop more commercial, there's just not the hourly staff to fulfill those jobs. So you mentioned that several times throughout your report here about more viable options for affordable housing to bring in those mixed wage earners, we'll call them. But you also mentioned you don't know what the actual end layout or mix of product is going to be on this land as far when it comes to residential. So
Other
is-
than insofar as the density ranges we've identified and the types of, the type of
Correct.
residential we've identified for the different zones.
So I guess then what is there, as far as the guarantee within the plan that there will be some mixed income housing, whether that's
Well,
sticking with the townhome idea where those are definitely more affordable than what we're currently seeing?
All we can say at this time is, so land planning, land use does not dictate the type of the type of ownership.
Correct.
So we have multifamily residential. That could be condos, it could be apartments, it could in theory be low-income apartments. That is not controlled by the land use code, or can it be?
Right.
Legally.
Correct,
So-
but I bring it up because it's mentioned several times
Yeah,
throughout
but I
here,
understand your
and
point.
you
So-
mentioned it
so
as
the-
well.
The density and the type of units we're proposing will dictate price point.
Right.
So townhomes will be at a lower price point than a single family attached, which similarly will be at a lower price point than a single family detached. And the different densities of single family detached will again be at different price points based on the size of the lots. So within this development, you're probably going to have, based on the different types of zones we have, multiple different price points which can serve different parts of the community.
Okay.
It helps answer your question. I can't say at this point, though, what that price point will be.
Right. I think just the idea of having some sort of mixed income area is certainly suitable for the lack of workforce in Monument. So, from my perspective, that is positive. The last question, it's short. You said you didn't think it was a viable option for commercial use back in 2015. What has changed, or what new information do you have now to support the mixed use that does contain some commercial? Why is that
Yeah, I mean,
going to be
we are
useful now?
focusing- We're hoping it's going to be viable. Let's put it that way. I think my client's preference would still be an entirely residential development here. We are trying to meet the intent of the original zoning to have some commercial in this location. We are trying to meet the intent of now, which wasn't in place in 2015, the 2017 comprehensive plan, which shows this as a mixed-use area. So we're trying to meet all those intents with a balance between the commercial and residential that we feel that we could maybe make work. It's despite being on an intersection, a highway intersection, the design of the 105 interchange, because of the mouse habitat, which pushes the off-ramp way over to the east and west on both sides, makes this a not visible site, a very poorly visible site from that intersection, unlike Baptist Road area. It doesn't have that visibility that Monument Marketplace does. But we did feel that we could maybe make some local, commercial, and more service-oriented uses work as part of more of a village centre feel and scale.
Okay. So, but nothing's changed. You still
Not-
don't feel it
nothing's
would
really
be
changed
viable.
market-wise, other than that there is a trend, I would say, towards more of these, and we discuss this with the economic analysts of these aggregation centres where people do kind of want to come together in a single place, part of the community, for a variety of different reasons. It's not just your 1980s strip mall. It's really a place that has cafes, maybe some restaurants, maybe like the things are gyms, yoga studios, like I say, the place where you can pick up your Amazon package, UPS, whatever, and just more things that are needed on a day-to-day basis to serve the community.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem, thanks. Here's your questions.
Good. Let me turn that. My first question is going to go to the staff related to the fees to the school are currently based on building permits. Correct. Didn't we have conversation that in the review of the code that we're doing, that could change to be an upfront payment at some point in time?
We do collect the fees at the time of building permit. Those fees are not set by the town. We simply are told by the district what to charge, and they would be responsible to back up with documentation why those fees are at a certain level.
Oh, that's right, and it becomes their burden to come for the total upfront. Is that correct? Didn't we have a discussion?
Well, what we talked about was there are communities that charge school fees, park fees, at the time of subdivision.
Right.
As opposed to when each lot develops.
Right. And my question is that under consideration for?
I think that the consultants have been told to look at that.
Okay, that you answered my question.
And we will be
Yeah.
required to do whatever is in place at the time we subdivide.
I just
or-
want those clarification
Yeah, yeah.
based on the conversations that we'd had for myself. Now, can you put up the, where it shows the commercial development that now is currently authorized if this stayed commercial?
The zoning map.
The list of uses?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I'm sorry.
It's a bit slow, bear with me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the highlighted one, but it's the same list.
The reason is, one of my biggest concerns is compatibility in communities. And I think that this, going residential, is far more compatible than commercial would be to the folks that currently have homes up there. I can assure you that you have no idea what is going to be built on a commercial lot that causes you not to enjoy the home that you currently own. The movement through the two accesses through Knollwood and White Marble is a far less concern than you would have with some of the commercial facilities that could be built on this property. And at some point in time, and maybe it's been 40 years since there's been no interest, there will be interest at some point in time. And the folks that currently enjoy their homes up there may not like very well what might be built. Having a home built beside you is far better than having some of the commercial development. Commercial development has its proper place, but the proper place is out away from the homes. People buy homes for peace and quiet and enjoyment. I think this adds significantly to peace and quiet and enjoyment. Now, you might question the peace and quiet and enjoyment of the homes that might be right along I-25, but hopefully there will be proper items put there to mitigate some of that. But I think that in terms of whether this should stay commercial or whether it should be residential or mixed use as it is by far, I think that this change is beneficial to the current owners of property, and it would be beneficial to the folks that are able to purchase a home in the area. My only concern would be on the commercial office area, that red area that you have in the mixed area, use area. The one thing that I would hope that we could either keep from being in there or wouldn't be in there is a gasoline station. We've got, or if they have gasoline stations, that it's kept down to 4 or 6 pumps. You get these 16 to 24 pump service stations, and I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, in a residential area like this. And what you have is a 24-hour service where folks are seriously bothered at night. It doesn't take very many motorcycles to pull up at 2 o'clock in the morning to wake up the neighborhood. So I would hope that somewhere in the process of refining what goes in there, that we don't permit large service station in the area. That's the only thing that I can think of. Again, my big concern is that we build communities that are compatible for the residents to enjoy the home that they've purchased. And I think this is by far one of the best things that we could do with that piece of property. That's all I have.
Question. Old Denver Highway.
Yes.
The applicant has property and owns property along Old Denver Highway that is currently zoned PID.
PID, yes.
Why not look to rezone that PID versus this area? What?
I think when I was talking to the zoning map and going through that area, we are in the process of doing a rezone on that area for commercial and PID. So it's kind of separate.
For more of a mixed use as well?
Really no residential in that area. It's the proximity to the Baptist Road I-25 interchange and the visibility from I-25 that actually does make that a good site for commercial industrial uses. So we want that. The intent really of submitting these pretty much at the same time is to show that this is the area that we feel is next to existing residential. It should be residential, whereas that area, there's commercial industrial to the north of it, there's commercial industrial zone to the south of it. That whole strip is intended to be industrial uses, so it just made sense for that, the concentration for commercial, and it has far better access up I-25.
Okay. What in regards, I guess, north of the Connexus business development?
Yes. Oh, we're talking that north part.
Yeah, the north part, and along the Santa Fe Trail and Old Denver Highway. Old Denver Highway, for me, is more residential street than Jackson Creek. As far as an like Jackson Creek is a main artery for our town, where Old Denver Highway is more of a slower street for residential. So why not focus residential along Old Denver Highway versus Jackson Creek to change that commercial?
It's a different developer who's working on that northern part. So
Oh, it's not the same
client,
owner?
He is the owner, but he's contracted with a different
Okay.
developer.
Gotcha, okay.
But he owns and is processing the southern part south of Connexus, between Connexus and Baptist, for commercial and industrial development at this time.
Okay.
I anticipate that the area to the north, well, I can't anticipate it.
Okay.
It's going to go there, but that is the area that is next to the residential.
Yeah.
The area to the south, there is no existing residential there.
And that's currently in the works, but nothing north of the Connexus Business
Nothing
Park?
north of the Connexus is currently in the works.
Okay,
It's submitted to the town, anyway.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Based on her question, I'd like to make another comment. The other advantage I see to this is it's right by the YMCA, and it's right by a school. When people can walk out their door and enjoy going over to the YMCA, or there's children walking to school, is a far, far greater advantage than some of the distances that they otherwise have to go. So again, I think this is just ideal for housing.
Just another question. Walking, commercial across the interstate, if we have across Jackson Creek, the balance of commercial on the west side, the residentials will be serviced by that commercial property.
Yes.
What about that east side? Because
Well,
my
there-
concern
there'll
is
have
people walking across Jackson
Yeah,
Creek.
there will have to be some incorporation of pedestrian crossing at a signal somewhere in that development. We anticipate a signal or a roundabout with pedestrian refuges. So we will have to take into account the ability to cross Jackson Creek Parkway from one side to the other. There will be sidewalks, obviously, all the way along, and it will be similar to further south where there are opportunities to cross Jackson Creek. It will be at the intersection, so.
Is there a possibility of adding more commercial on that east side to service those residents?
I don't think, if we were to do that, we'd probably be splitting it rather than providing more on that side, and I just don't think that's going to provide the same kind of commercial hub as it would if it was all on one side. The residents on the east side could actually potentially, if they wanted to walk, there is the village centre. If they didn't want to cross Jackson Creek Parkway, there is the village centre commercial area that they could walk to with the connection of Norwood through. If that was the issue of not wanting to cross Jackson Creek, but we will be providing opportunities with the intersection improvements to allow for pedestrian connection.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, at this time, I would like to open the floor to public comment. Any public comments? If you have a public comment, make sure you sign up in the back. And- Yep, and the podium, and when you come up, see. Is there one at the podium?
No, it's just in the back.
Okay.
But you can bring it to the podium if you prefer.
I still have a question about the drainage.
Awesome. Come on up, sir. Please state your name and address.
My name is Myron Stevens. I live at 1335 Villa Grove. And that's Monument Villas.
Okay.
We have 2 retention ponds that drain out of there. Are there provisions for that? And then next door to us is still county land, and they drain out into this land.
Marion, thank you for your question.
And the other thing is school. If they're going to live on that $13.50 per unit, I think that's going to change, because that was $13.50 in 2008, and shop class at Palmer Lake, or Lewis Palmer and Palmer Ridge was $50 for the manufacturing class. $50 won't touch the material that we need for a manufacturing class now. So if we're going to build schools, we got to have some money someplace to build schools or land.
Thank you, Marion. Appreciate it.
I think I was the next one on that list. So, my name is Laura Lucero, and I'm at 19235 Wakanda Way. I oppose the rezoning from PCT to PD. I don't think we need another 715 residences, even though I hear what you're saying maybe about getting workers up here. I like Monument, I like the size of it. I moved here from Colorado Springs intentionally because I like the small town feel. I'm really concerned about the fact that the town of Monument never says no to any of the developments that are coming. I'm worried about water. Water was one of the things that we talked about at the community meeting, because I was there too. I did hear that Woodmore said they will serve, but I'm still concerned that water is going to be a real issue. I'm on a well. I'm concerned about that. I don't get those numbers on the kids. I'm like you. I did the math. 715 homes, and you get 55 to 165 kids out of 715 homes doesn't seem reasonable, even though they might have had to use a calculation that's perhaps outdated. But I think common sense tells us that there will be more children than that out of 715 residences. So for those reasons, and I think even the traffic saying that residential will cause less traffic than a commercial, I think it really does depend on the type of commercial. That list indicates to me some types of commercial that might not create that increase in traffic that 715 homes might. So I'd just like to make sure my concerns get on the record.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Christy Musser, 1734 Lazy Cat Lane. I think tonight we're here for rezoning, basically, and then the use planning and the site plans will come later. So just for the rezoning from commercial to residential, I'm in favor of it. I'm I agree with Danny, everything that you said. I think that area, when I envisioned it and I saw the commercial signs up, I couldn't really envision commercial buildings with all of the residential and the YMCA and the schools nearby. I thought residential would be a way better idea up near the north end of Jackson Creek more than commercial. I think that also, I would like to make note that while in the future, on the future site plans and planning, I know that she was talking about having a small area for commercial within that development, and I can't really envision that, so I'd be curious to see what that would look like, because, you know, I live up on Baptist, and I also like the Monument small town feel, but I'd like to go to King Soopers and to Walmart and to Beister on the Second down in downtown Monument to go to dinner and to, you know, I don't want to have the commercial right next door to me. So I'm curious to see what that would look like. And one other thing I'd like to make note of is on the site plan that she put up with the walking trail outside of the entire development along I-25, like Chris had said, it kind of seemed a little bit weird to me. And I just anticipate if you do have block walls and barrier walls in between apartment buildings or townhomes in I-25 and you have a walking trail, to me, I just see tagging with kids, tagging on the walking trails, or going back there to be smoking or doing drugs, and I just anticipate more havoc that might cause. So if somehow they could create the walking trail like how they did in the middle of it and keep it more centralized so you can see the kids and they can be more, you know, or people walking their dogs and stuff, it's safer, I think, being inclusive in the community instead of the exterior of the community. So that's just something that I noticed for future of the site plan in the future. But we, my husband and I are very much in favor of rezoning it from commercial to residential. So thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Good evening, I'm Phil Schweitzer. I live on Long Meadow Lane, 15980 Long Meadow. Been here since 2001, right off of Baptist Road. Foxton Park is my backyard. My backyard fence, there's a public path right there. So I know some of the positives and negatives of that experience. Since 2001, I probably used the Santa Fe Trail probably 1,000 times. I use it regularly. Andrea made the last time, I was there last time, and Andrea integrated some of the comments I made, and I thank you for that. Thank you very much. In general, I support this project. This community, all communities in America, need more lower-priced housing. My children are now gone. I'd love to have them come back, but not at $600,000 a house, $700,000, $800,000. We don't need any more $700,000 houses. My house is close to that. This community, like most of America, needs more $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 prices for my kids to come back here. The next thing is, if my kids were here, they would say, "Dad, where's the mass transit?" My oldest is in Philadelphia. He is employed by Drexel University. He has no car. He takes mass transit to work. He's lived all over the world. He's lived in Beijing, China, mass transit. He says, "Dad, where is it?" Number 2 son just moved to Minneapolis. We got an email from him the other day, "Hey Dad, I took my bike to work today, first time." He works in downtown Minneapolis. My youngest, my baby, she lives in San Francisco with her husband, and he makes in 1 year what I make in 3, and takes mass transit to work. They have 1 car between the 2 of them. They live in San Francisco. It's so expensive there. Anyways, so in general, I support this. We need a broad price range of prices for our homes. My next comments, I'm going to go literally off in the weeds here a little bit with an indirect comment and then a direct comment. Santa Fe Trail. In the next 1 to 10 years, it will change drastically, the situation there. The trail's not going anywhere. It will be there, but it's a huge asset to our community. It's surrounded by commercial land. That experience will change. And that's the way life is. That's just the way it is. We can't stop that change because it is zoned. There's a guy who owns property there. We need to respect his ownership rights. We need to plan today so that in 5, 10, 20 years from now, we've been proactive in this. Also, as you look at the Santa Fe Trail going south, a huge chunk of it, a very beautiful chunk of it, goes to the Air Force Academy. Air Force Academy isn't going anywhere, but what is changing, can change, which will always change, is the security protocol there. That situation there within an hour, they could shut down that trail for a security situation. That's a huge chunk of that trail, and that ain't going away. That's gonna be there forever, that security issue. And we need to think, so, okay, if the east side, or the west side of the interstate with the Santa Fe Trail is gonna change over the next 5-10 years, and it's a huge asset to our community, what are we doing today to change that, to address that, to look into that issue? In 2003, the City of Monument created a Parks, Trails, Open Space Master Plan, 2003, which talked about a trail on the east side of the interstate running north-south. As I understand it, that master plan, open space, was superseded in 2017 by a new plan, comprehensive plan. And that I have not seen. But also in 2015, the Pikes Peak Regional Non-Motorized Transportation System Plan was created, and it talked about a route, what they call a corridor on the east side of the interstate, which would be what I'm going to call Santa Fe Trail East. It's a corridor, it's labeled within their plan Corridor 38. And it's a proposed route trail running north-south, basically down to the Springs, all the way up to County Line Road. And again, that's the Regional Non-Motorized Transportation System Plan approved in 2015. Now, most of that plan talks about an on-road corridor, which basically on Jackson Creek, a sidewalk, which is better than nothing, but not that great. Now, stepping aside, since 2001, as I've watched development along Baptist Road, in general, I'm pro-development, but I've looked at it, and some of my observations, it seems like generally a lot of development has been good, but a lot of it was done, I don't want to say short-sighted, but kind of tending to look at a development as a little island instead of looking at it, well, this is part of a community, of a greater community. And that's my comment about this. It seems to be pretty well laid out, but as far as how it applies to, we tend to react to all these neighbors that are within 3 blocks, well, the neighbor block away. And I do own a piece of land on the east side, a home that's within 100 yards of this. So
Phil, I have to caution you on timing, sir. So please keep it specific to this and what you want us to know about this subject at hand.
So with the focus of making this parcel integrate into a larger trail system, Andrea addressed my comments by bringing in a trail on the whole west side of it. As far as making this area more conducive for use for the greater community, like Santa Fe Trail, I asked that the trail have an 8-foot wide crushed limestone, which is essentially what the Santa Fe Trail is. Andrea didn't note on the bottom and the top, the north and south end, an arrow indicating that there would be a good strong possibility the trail extending north and south. And my other wish list, which is probably going to happen, is a trailhead. If you look at Santa Fe, use of that trail is used a lot by parking and a trailhead that's very open to the public. If there was some sort of a parking trailhead there, you'd have a much greater use to the greater community.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other public comments? Going once, going twice. Okay, we are closed for public comments.
You might give the applicant, if they so desire, a chance to rebut.
Yes, sir. Andrea, would you like to comment to any of those?
Just a couple of things, really. I think most of what was said I'd already addressed in my presentation. So I don't think there's much I can add to that. But the matter of the detention, the drainage, we are required with the development of this site to provide on-site detention and water quality. And with that, we have to take into account all off-site flows that are coming onto the property and detain those as well. And so any existing drainage that's coming onto this property from adjacent land to the east, as was indicated, has to be transported to these detention facilities. And we have a kind of master utility plan that's part of our sketch plan submittal, which shows the general location of the 4 detention ponds. And our civil engineer is here if you want any more detailed information on drainage and detention. And he has spoken multiple times with the neighbour on this matter, both at the neighbourhood meeting we had in February and previously in 2015 when we had neighbourhood meetings. The only other thing I will say is, obviously you're hearing different things about the trails. We try to please everybody, we can't. Obviously people are going to have different opinions about certain things. The trail we are showing is indicative of an intent for a trail network within the development, around the development, and we include trails through the development. That will be refined as we go through the process. If we come across a situation where we have likelihood of creating a narrow, unsafe area for a trail because of a wall or what have you, we will address those concerns and issues when we get to the detailed development plan stage. But the intention of Mr. Schwarzer, I can't pronounce his name, sorry, Phil, is that it is the reason for going around the perimeter of the site so it's uninterrupted by street crossings. So that was the intent of that. So I thought that was a reasonable request, as well as serving the broader community, to serve the broader community as well as specifically for this development. And I think that's it, unless you have any additional questions for me based on the neighbours' comments.
Commissioners? Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate it. Okay, commissioners. Discussion? Oh, I closed the public comments. Oh, at this moment, I would like to close the public comments and hearing and have a discussion amongst the commissioners.
Dan, I agree with you on this idea that we are taking on a new look, or not a new look, but reevaluating zoning use, really. And that may be a very great opportunity for more money for schools, no doubt about it. And I think that that's a huge need here. I do disagree regarding the potential envisioning of just single-family homes lining this area. It's not what 15 to 25 dwelling units per acre calls on. And that's an unprecedented density. We don't have that right now. And I haven't heard any justification for getting to that next level of density in Monument. I didn't hear it here. I didn't hear it from the staff, and it's there. I think that needs to be very much considered because, well, why not 30? Why not 35? I simply just didn't hear it. I mean, there's things floating out there regarding an economic need. I didn't hear any numbers. I didn't hear any like concrete, this is what this is going to fulfill economically. It sounds good, but I didn't hear that. I think this is an island. This truly is an island. To the south, commercial. To the immediate west, we have Baptist. To the immediate east, Baptist. We have to the immediate west, an interstate. And then just north, we have 105. To me, there's a reason why this commercial corridor was carved out. You know, it lines 25 and lines Baptist. And obviously, I'm sorry, you're right, Jackson Creek, and obviously the further you go east, yes, residential comes up, and that's, to me, that's consistent with where we're at. Creating this island of residential just is completely inconsistent, and again, I don't see, other than there's been no commercial bites at this land. That's the only justification I've heard. But that's been the same way for the past 40 years. I don't know if there's any impetus or rush or need to make this type of change and not even consider, to Phil's point, this idea of plan. Well, what about the parcel south? And any other changes to the areas that line 25 to make them residential? It's not being done on the west side, so why is it being done on the east side? And again, the idea of a 50-foot building height, that this is going to, I see this turning into something that looks like Struthers as you go south. And Struthers has become, and will continue to become, just an eyesore of, you know, walls, possibly storage, right? Like whatever it is, it's not what I think it's going to or should be. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no need to make this change at this time, and there hasn't been a presentation that justifies this change.
I have a question to ask you about this. I mean, the landowner has rights. Why would we impede on his rights to do what he wants with his land for any reason?
So the idea being, like what Phil brought up, mass transit, beautiful thing, works in cities, we need it. That invariably impedes on owners' rights. The idea that like lines were just there and no property owner was in that way, it didn't happen. So in terms of growth, the idea that a landowner has the unabashed ability to do whatever he or she wants with its land, obviously we have the existing zoning permitted uses. There's already restrictions. So this land has been for the past 40 years, if not longer, commercial. So if the landowner decides, oh, we want to, or I'd like to make it residential now, there needs to be a greater consideration for the entire community.
And that will come in the follow-on meetings and presentations. And if we happen to change our code, our zoning permitted uses and the land use codes in the meantime, they will be subject to those.
No,
But
they won't be. They'll be subject to both planes and setbacks and landscaping requirements and that.
Well, there's still going to be other plans that we can, what was the term you used, approve with conditions, right? So we can
But the
approve.
problem is that so far, the ones I've seen, these sketch plans that come in here, every single one of them, they build to the exact amount of units that they can make it do. And a good example is Sanctuary Point. And if you ever get a chance to drive through there, it's like there's 6,000 square foot lots in the trees, and they mowed down 70% of the trees. And it's built to the exact number that was approved on this sketch. That's where I have problems with this.
And we have the rules set that allow them to do that.
Well,
right?
but this is effectively making it its own zone district. You know, so this is taking a piece of property and making it its own zoning. They're asking for this stuff, and if we approve it, then we've got to be willing to accept 715 units the way we have seen it. I mean, they can say they're going to take out units, but are they going to take out units? I don't know. If you're okay with that, then that's.
I'm just I'm not for or against the amount of units right now. I'm for the landowner's rights to make a request to rezone so he can sell it.
Right, and I don't have
And
a
that's what
problem
they're
with
asking
the-
for.
I don't have a problem with the residential aspect of it at all. I have a problem with the density, and I know it'll get pushed to the limit. And so, look, I mean, effectively, this is 9.7 units per acre if you take out the commercial stuff. And the whole project, that's what it is. We don't have anything that's like that here. And if you read the comprehensive plan, it talks a lot about small town feel, character, this and that. I mean, this is bringing Northgate to the monument.
Wouldn't you consider that everything east of I-25 from Baptist north is not a small town feel?
Well, but this makes it less of a small town feel. If you're gonna go by the comprehensive plan, I mean, we've got to balance the public will, the comprehensive plan, and kind of make a judgment call. And you know, again, I mean, if you think that works, then that's your prerogative. And if you don't think it works, you gotta look at what you think the community might want. Maybe the community might love this, but we don't have 50 people coming in here to tell us, so we gotta decide on our own.
If, just a couple of my comments here. I mean, I look at the comp plan and it does say mixed use. So at that point, we have to define what's mixed use to us. The reality is, over the last 40 years, Monument, anything below the Palmer Ridge, didn't exist to those living north of that. With the GAP project complete and all those folks that are now moving south, that isn't the truth anymore. And I think all of this land is going to develop at some point. So we have an opportunity right now to decide what is, under that mixed use, the best use of this property going forward.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the residential aspect and rezoning.
And I'm not directing these at you, Steve, it's more of the board.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, and I lean more towards the residential side myself. The concern I have, and with the manager here and staff, is the road work and the lack, what I perceive as the lack of participation and recognition of where Monument is going with the county. Looking at 105, to have the county not say that that could become a problem if this were to develop, and that's the perception I got, is interesting to me. Hodgen Road, I mean, you pick the roads that are running, or, you know, that are running through this town, that half are owned by the county, half are owned by us, you know, and the fact that those roads, the increases in size of those roads are not convenient to the county when we're ready to build on a certain piece of property, I think hinders our ability to control our own growth. And I think that's something that truly needs to be addressed. Jackson Creek Parkway in itself, I would have a lot of trouble with us going forward with this project without some condition that Jackson Creek Parkway will be funded and is completed. Because that road, that intersection at 105 and Jackson Creek, when the school is out, is terrible. When traffic is coming down from Denver, all the way from the highway up 105 is horrendous. And I have a lot of problems with that. So that's my take on this project.
Home Place Ranch. We've just approved the start of Home Place Ranch, which is a lot of single-family residents. Powers, back in '99, when I started working with the builder, Powers was a 2-lane road. And everything east of Powers was residential. And there was a sea of homes. You saw a sea of homes. You could drive down Powers now, and the commercial is there. And so I've always envisioned Jackson Creek as a main artery for our town. And I don't mind the mixed use. I don't believe that right now is a time to decide this at this moment due to density and what we have in the pipeline with the single-family communities that are coming up.
We also have this development plan under works, right? And the consultants are gonna make lots of recommendations.
Any other comments? Okay.
Are we ready for a motion?
Anybody ready for motion?
What's the verbiage? I motion to approve
Or motion to vote.
Okay, so turn on your mic, and then you make the motion.
To vote. To vote.
I make the motion that we vote on the village rezone and sketch PD plan.
Okay?
Second.
Okay, hold on. So you're motioning to vote,
Yes.
okay?
To approve.
To approve
To
or to
approve.
vote? To approve. Okay,
So we have the
Commissioner-
motion to vote, and then you will vote.
Right.
Each of
Okay.
you will vote to.
so,
No, we need a motion to either
Approve.
approve, deny,
Correct.
or
Yeah.
approve with conditions.
Yes.
yes.
My motion's to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Chairman Melanie Strop.
No.
Co-Chairman Daniel Ors.
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis.
Yes.
Commissioner Wilhelmie.
No?
Commissioner King.
Okay, so I always like to preface my votes because I like to people know where I'm coming from. And I've said a lot of things to justify what my position is on this, but I always go back to the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan talks a lot about small town character and small town feel, and I agree we need mixed use and diversity and probably some lower price points, but I have a huge problem with the density on this project, and therefore I vote no.
Commissioner LaKind.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
In the interest of mixed income housing, yes.
Three, two, three. Did I miss somebody? Oh, 4. So it's 4-3 vote
Motion passes.
in favor, and motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, next on the agenda item is public comments that are not on the agenda item, on the agenda. Yes, come on up. Please state your name. Did you sign in by chance?
I did not sign in yet.
After you comment, can you sign in,
I sure
please?
will, yep.
Name and address, please.
My name is Allison Robenstein. I'm with the OCN, 1670 Woodmore Drive. Could I ask that you please turn on your microphones and speak into the microphones the entire time? And I ask that because when I watch from home, and the rest of us do, when you sit back and you have your microphones off, we hear absolutely nothing. So I just ask if you could possibly do that, rather than turning them on and off all the time just to vote. If you could leave them on, that would be so appreciative. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. We will work on that.
Kind of forget about it.
Any other public comments that are not on the agenda? Okay. Next agenda item, reports and communications. Do you guys have anything?
I believe we're following up this meeting with a short work session with our consultant. It's going to give us a status update of the code reload.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, our next meeting is April 8th, 2020 at 6 p.m. And I need a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. It is now 8:16. It is adjourned.
Gotta use it.
Tell you what.